I'm Mariette DiCristina, and I'm the Dean of Boston University's College of Communication. I'm also an alum of COM and the parent of a recent BU grad. You're so welcome, and thanks for joining us for today's COM Talks event, The Rise of Influencer Marketing. If you're seeing more sponsored posts in your Instagram feed these days, there's a reason why. Influencer marketing is on the rise, and our expert panel is here to tell us more about it. They will have a wide-ranging conversation around the strategies, the platforms, and the emerging trends. And you'll get to get your questions answered as well. This event is being recorded. When you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen rather than in the chat, and feel free to put them in anytime you have them. And now let's meet our speakers. First, I'd love to give a warm welcome to Sonia Cabrillo, who is Senior Studying Journalism at COM. She's been involved with student brand ambassador programs throughout her time at BU. Thank you for that, Sonia. And starting with Razor Scooters partnership during her sophomore year. Since then, Sonia has worked with Venmo, Rent the Runway, Comcast Xfinity, and Bear Paw Shoes to introduce brands to the college audience via Instagram. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Now let's say hello to Justine Bakshi. After graduating from COM in 2012, hi Justine, Justine launched her advertising career in media planning. Working in various channels across digital and traditional media, she developed a diverse skill set at Wavemaker in London and San Francisco. She later transitioned to OMD, where she became team leader and developed strong client relationships. Her experience in digital media sparked a particular interest in social, so she relocated to LA and began working for Socialitize, a small but mighty social media agency. She's now the senior influencer marketing manager, leading an agile team that is building influencer strategies and campaigns for clients across multiple industries. Her most recent project was curating talent for the Immunity Boost Festival, the world's first virtual music, health, and wellness festival that featured top-tier musicians, athletes, and health experts to spread a powerful message. Hi there again, Justine. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
As a native New Yorker, Kate Weisner, a graduate of COM in 2019, adopted Boston as her own and has called herself a proud Bostonian ever since her freshman year at BU. Early on, Kate discovered her love for Boston and photography, which she's combined together to create Bucket List Boston, an Instagram feed that doubles as a proverbial bucket list of Boston. In the 5 years Kate has had her blog, she's worked with local coffee shops, restaurants, museums, and brands. Notably, she's partnered with Lyft, the Ritz-Carlton, Eataly, American Express, Blue Bikes, and others. Kate's been featured in the Boston Globe, the Boston Voyager, and on NESN. She now serves as head of creative at Life Alive Organic Cafe while juggling Bucket List Boston on the side. Thanks so much for joining us, Kate.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's say hello to our moderator. Mike Prue has over 25 years of experience developing marketing programs through a lens of what's next in consumer behavior, media, and technology, working with national brands that include Dunkin', CVS Health, TJ Maxx, BMW, Boar's Head, Tempur-Pedic, and LG. In 2012, Mike published the best-selling book, Social TV, and he continues to share his thoughts on emerging media every Tuesday morning on NECN. Mike served 12 years at Hill Holliday, where he developed and grew the agency's digital capabilities as its chief digital officer. And in 2 weeks, Mike will be joining Forrester to lead the company's CMO practice. We've been so very lucky to have him here with us at COM this semester. Thanks so much, and over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Mariette. Really appreciate it. We've organized this panel into 3 main topic areas. There is the state of influencer marketing, best practices of influencer marketing programs, and then the future of influencer marketing. At any point in time, we really encourage you guys to add your questions to the Q&A so that we can take audience questions at different times throughout today's panel. I want to begin with Justine. Justine, critics have a love-hate relationship with influencer marketing. They often say that it is the most overhyped, overused and overreported tactic in the marketing sector. What's your reaction to that?
I mean, I think sometimes influencer marketing can get a bad rap because, you know, there are people getting paid by brands to promote something. But I think that as long as they stay true to themselves and truly believe in the product or service, you know, that they're promoting, I think the authenticity of a person's full-hearted recommendation can be really powerful on social. So I don't believe that at all. I think there's a lot to be said for influencer marketing. You know, it can be done wrong, but you know, there's lots of best practices that, you know, we hold true and see successful time and time again. So.
Kate, along those same lines, there was a survey just this past August from Ipsos where it showed that only 15% of the respondents said that they have trust in influencers. The group of people that got the lowest amount of trust were politicians, and influencers were just above politicians, which were 12%. Are you, as an influencer, are you someone that's not trustworthy?
I'm definitely trustworthy. I grew the brand not as a way to become an influencer because I was really wanting followers. It came out of failure, actually. So as a freshman, I found myself exploring Boston and wanting to take on the city as my own. Coming from New York, I had never really appreciated that I could love another city just as much. And I did fall in love with Boston, and I found myself taking photos on my iPhone and just snapping anywhere that I went. And eventually, by the end of the first semester of freshman year, my phone storage was totally full with these photos that I wasn't doing anything with. And I decided that there should be a better use for them. And I found that there was an innovative photo community on Instagram called IG Boston that you could apply to be a part of. And I figured that that would be a great way to break out of the BU bubble and meet new people. So I applied not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times. And I was rejected every single time with a new explanation as to why my photo wasn't right or my content wasn't exactly what they were looking for. And I took that as a reason that I should just prove to myself and to this community that I could do it. And from there, I just had classmates and friends of mine approach me and say that the post that I was posting that day was the highlight of their day. And I started to realize I was impacting people without even meaning to. And it was really just trying to prove to myself at first that I could create this content about Boston. And so because of all of that, I feel that the blog came out of a really authentic and genuine place, and that I've built a following that believes in me and trusts me because it came from iPhone photos that were oversaturated 5 years ago. And now it has grown into brand collaborations and partnerships, but I always stay true to where the blog started, which is just true recommendations to people that want to listen. And so I only take on collaborations with brands that I truly believe in.
And it sounds like the very beginnings of your blog and your Instagram were built from an authentic place, which is key. And Sonia, Global Web Index, also in August, did a survey around influencer marketing, and they found that humor and likability were the top most preferred traits amongst followers of influencers. But then the pandemic hit and trust became the top trait. So we're still on this conversation of trust. I'm curious to hear your point of view on why do you think trust suddenly, because of the pandemic, bumped up in terms of the most popular trait that followers want from influencers like you?
Well, I mean, everything is even more competitive now. But I think when it comes to influencing, it's all about transparency. People kind of get this idea that if you're paid to promote something, you'll promote anything. And it's also sometimes blurred whether you're paid and whether you're just posting something and what really happened to get you to the point where you wanted to promote this product, right? So I think it comes about like being picky. I'm picky about the things that I want to choose to promote to my followers. I wouldn't promote something that I genuinely believe isn't worth their time, isn't worth my time. If I don't like it, I'm not going to tell other people about it. I think that's where trust starts to waver. But I do think that if you do it right and you're authentic and you're promoting yourself as what's something you believe in, then it's worth it. And you become kind of a role model in that way. Like you're showing people, okay, this is like how I want to go about what I'm doing. And it becomes a business. Like Kate said, she grew it into something, but she wasn't going in it as a way to just become an influencer.
Influencers for sure have a platform where they can do a lot of good, or they can not be role models. And I want to kind of segue into how the pandemic has affected influencer marketing. Justine, when things first hit, there were a lot of headlines back in Q2 and Q3 that said influencer marketing is dead. We heard reports of brands that were just slashing their budgets, and especially their influencer budgets. And it felt like brand partnership opportunities between brands and influencers were drying up. Hype Auditor, they did a survey just a few weeks ago in November, and they actually reported that there is now an increase in partnerships and brands around influencer marketing. So maybe the hype that influencer marketing is dead is just incorrect. What are you seeing in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think when the pandemic hit, all brands really kind of choked, right? I mean, I think it was obviously a really difficult turning point for brands, and many of them had to get creative and pivot drastically and cut budgets because they didn't know what was to come. But I also think it turned into opportunities for some. So some of the industries that have really been thriving are health and wellness, fitness, beauty, self-care. People are spending more time indoors and less time commuting. So maybe they have more time on their health, on their hands for self-care. And so I think that, there are some industries that realize that there really is an opportunity here to tap into influencers in that space. Even DIY projects, parenting, budgeting, all of these topics are huge right now. And I think that, people are really turning to social media in general and influencers for advice in that space. I would say the last really interesting one for me is music, specifically as an escape. So we've been really leaning heavily into live virtual music at Social Ties, because the future of music is virtual for the time being, since artists can't perform in person. So tying musicians with brands has been huge, where the brand pays musicians to perform virtually by sponsoring their shows. And in turn, the musicians provide visibility and awareness for the brand. So it's definitely a win-win there. So I think there's a lot of industries that are getting really creative and finding ways to tap into influencers and realizing that people are turning to them for their advice.
And Kate, as you've worked with some brands in the past and you're sort of up on what's happening within the space, what are brands getting wrong when it comes to influencer marketing?
Ooh, it's a tough question. I would say the first thing that comes to mind is I get emails all the time from brands that don't align with what I'm doing at all. And it boggles my mind that they would think that their product would match my followers and my feed and everything that I'm posting about. Like some kind of like processed food thing that just doesn't make any sense with any of the other content that I've posted. And it just feels very impersonal and confusing. So I would say that not looking into the influencers' previous content and possibly other partnerships they've had is a big flaw in larger influencer platforms, and that they should really dive in deeper and see would our product actually make sense on this feed, even if they were to say yes, before they actually go ahead and ask and pitch.
That's really interesting. My experience has been that brands have been pretty choosy about the types of influencers, but this sort of spray and pray mentality seems to foster itself in lots of different areas. Sonia, we've seen, of course, a meteoric rise of TikTok, and an everyday person can become, quote unquote, an influencer or TikTok famous in an instant with the right content. How has that changed how you engage as an influencer?
Yeah, I think TikTok is a whole new world. And what it's really influenced for me is Reels on Instagram. So Instagram tried to come up with their own version of short little videos, which I'm sure most people know is called Reels. So it's different than just posting a video on Instagram, but basically it's their own little fun version of a quick video. And so now programs I'm a part of are like, okay, well, we want to compete, but we want our platform to be on Instagram. So how do we compete with TikTok? So it usually ends up being like, we want to figure out the equivalent to the platform that we're using. But a lot of times it's like, we got to go back to TikTok because this is where things are they're growing so fast. And that's the thing is if you post something that people consider to be trending, it grows and you can become an influencer overnight like that on TikTok. But it's because it's kind of like the instant gratification. Like you can see things, you can learn things, you can learn a new recipe on TikTok, you can learn like DIY things, and you can learn just anything basically on TikTok at this point. But I do think it has to do with feeling like, should you copy the content that other people are making? Like there's this struggle of all these TikTokers are becoming famous from doing this kind of video. So do I copy that video and do I try to create the content that's similar to what people are liking? Or do I stick to what I know I can do and kind of create my own brand and work on that? That's definitely a difficult decision because it's like, something is successful, but it might not be successful for you. So it's hard to kind of have that struggle with yourself.
Yeah, indeed. And tough choices to make in terms of what platforms that you invest on and not spreading yourself so thin across multiple platforms. Justine, we are looking ahead to 2021. Brands right now are trying to finalize their planning and their budgets. Where do you see influencer marketing fitting into the landscape of marketing in 2021?
Yeah, I honestly think it's going to account for a huge portion of brand marketing in the future. I think most brands will be leveraging it in one way or another. I think, as Sonia mentioned, TikTok and Reels are, platforms that are really taking off, as well as Instagram and Facebook Live, and, finding different ways to connect with your audience. And even stories, people are looking for that short kind of snackable content, and they're spending so much more time on stories than they had before. And so I think even though it's only a 24-hour time frame, there's still a lot of value for brands to be there. And so I think with all of these different emerging features that evolve in these different platforms, there's a lot more opportunity and a lot more interest in influencer marketing and tapping into these social trends. One thing you mentioned earlier was trust, and it's extremely important for brands to gain people's trust moving forward into 2021 and beyond. And I think that influencers will play a huge role in that. There are studies showing that, word of mouth is the primary factor behind, something like 20 to 50% of all purchasing decisions. And consumers are looking for those authentic recommendations, and they follow influencers for that reason. So I do think that it's going to be continue to grow and become more powerful. Specifically, I think that there is going to be a big trend towards micro influencers, because they have a really great balance of reach and engagement and are oftentimes more affordable than celebrities. So that's kind of where I see the landscape in 2021.
And the idea of micro influencers being that they generally have smaller, more niche followings, and you really approach it as a portfolio of multiple influencers to get more bang for your buck, versus placing all your bets and budgets on just a couple of larger influencers with big, huge followings. And we often find that micro influencers actually have greater engagement with their followings, which is one of the cases for that. Which brings up the question, Kate, that one of the reasons why influencers may get a bad rap is because what I found, they all seem to be stereotyped and categorized into just one bucket of influencers. Can you talk a little bit about how all influencers are not created equal, and what are the different flavors and types of influencers?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people, when they go to start an Instagram account or a blog or what have you, go into it because they're passionate about a niche topic, whether it's food or fashion or cosmetics, makeup. And then from there, once they start to gain traction and grow that following and have people that are interested in what they're doing and beyond their circle of friends that they actually know, and they see that strangers are interested in what they're doing, then it becomes this question of, do I continue just within this small box that I've created for myself? Like, am I only a food blogger? Or now that I have this influence and I have people that are interested in my life and what I'm doing, do I broaden from there? And do I start to sprinkle in more lifestyle and just my daily routine? And I've seen, for the most part, a lot of influencers lately kind of growing their scope and just sharing a lot and seeing what sticks. And it seems that that's working, and that when influencers have that unique appeal to their followers and that they have following that is interested in one part of their life, they tend to be interested in multiple aspects. And with my blog, at least, I didn't know this at the time, but I lucked out by not pigeonholing myself into one category. And by calling it Bucket List Boston, I was able to touch on a bunch of different industries. And I've definitely been very happy about that as I've grown, because it allows me to touch into hospitality and makeup and accessories and all of that without kind of going too far away from what I had originally set out to be.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good segue as we talk about the range of influencers. Sonia, over a year ago, let's just say I had a strange and unique opportunity to follow a YouTuber around for 24 hours, and it actually gave me this insane bird's eye view on sort of what happens behind the scenes of a semi-famous YouTuber. And what I learned and saw, and he and I had a deep discussion around this, was the pressure that he feels all of the time and anxiety to ensuring that he is increasing his engagement with his followers. And as part of that, he keeps trying to outdo the content that he's done before in order to maintain their interest. And over the course of time, he became a little bit, way too sensationalized in that process. Can you speak about your own experiences, if you're comfortable, Sonia, about the pressure and anxiety that you feel as an influencer, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so I think it first comes about when you get your first partnership or work with any kind of brand and you're wondering, is this content going to be good enough for them to repost? So it's kind of like your way to measure what you did. And if it was good, maybe they'll repost it. So I think I found myself putting myself in that position, like, let's see, if I post this picture, is it going to be reposted? Is it good enough to go on this company that's verified on Instagram? Is it good enough for them? And so that's kind of how I measured myself. But from there, I'm looking at things, and if someone I worked with got theirs posted but I didn't get mine posted, I was like, okay, what did I do wrong? Like, do I need to fix my lighting? Do I need to go back and think of the ideas or the poses or the way I position some products or something? And so it's constantly like going back to your process. And so I used to think I had a way and like a formula to kind of take pictures and to create content. But now I've realized that there is no formula, and it changes every single time. I mean, it changes based on where you're taking the pictures. It changes. You could say I have ways to edit pictures or ways to set up and frame things, but genuinely it changes all the time, and you're constantly looking at new ways and learning new tips. And so I think there is a pressure to kind of keep up with the way people are posting pictures, certain trends, and to make your pictures look worthy to go on big pages and things like that. And so you feel like they chose me for a reason, but I don't want to let them down. And so it's really hard. And I mean, I did a partnership with Nintendo Switch actually, which was really cool. And so I was taking pictures for it yesterday, and I ended up going into like 3 different locations, changed the lighting a million times. It was crazy. And I was like, no, I could just go with the first picture. It's probably fine. But then in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if people will like this. I don't know if this is going to look good. And maybe it looks good to me, but maybe the lighting's off here. And so it's constantly comparing yourself to other things. But then at the end of the day, you realize, okay, well, I like the way this one looks. And I think it goes well with what I'm putting out and kind of fits with my brand. And that's kind of where it settles. Like, you have to decide, is this what you want your image to look like? And eventually, I think you get back to that point, but you're always constantly like, yeah, do I need to change things up? And you do feel pressure.
All right, there's a lot of second guessing. Let's visit some of the audience questions. We have one directly for Justine. It's from Olivia Taylor. And Olivia asks, I believe I heard that you worked in London. If I heard that correctly, did you work in London immediately post-grad? As someone who wishes to work in London, I would love to hear any advice that you have on working abroad. Hopefully you worked in London.
I did. It was actually through COM. I studied abroad there, and in that program in my junior year, I worked at MEC London, and I worked with really awesome people over there. It was about a 2 to 3 month internship, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was my first dive into media planning, and that's kind of what set off and set the stage for the majority of my career. So I mean, as far as advice, I would say if you have the opportunity to work in London, do it. I absolutely loved it. I moved from California to Boston, and I'm definitely a huge advocate for experiencing new things and experiencing new cultures. And I would say, I would encourage it as much as you can.
Kate, I'll give you this question from Steve. He says, I'm an independent digital marketing and social media manager. Many of my clients receive buy 10K Instagram followers emails. Can you please speak about why this is not advisable?
Horrible idea. Never do it. For one, it could be a scam, but beyond that, the bigger thing is that you want an authentic following, and you don't want robots or not real people following you just to look like you have the numbers. Because the worst thing is if you have X number of followers and then you don't have the likes to back it up, or you don't have the comments or the engagement. And then when a brand asks to work with you and you don't have the proper analytics or demographics and statistics to back up that following, it makes you look even worse than if you just had a small following to begin with.
That is a great answer. Sonia, this is a question from Tess, and it's a great one in terms of all of the increased regulations from the FTC around influencers and disclosing whether or not they're doing a paid partnership. So Tess asks, when it comes to FTC disclosures, which option is best in terms of the performance for influencers? Which disclosure is preferred by brand partners?
Yeah, so that is obviously a big thing to know if you're planning on doing any kind of partnership with a brand. It has to be disclosed that you were paid to work with them, or you were given some kind of product. And I think a lot of people like to put at the beginning of their post, like sponsored, just so it's clear that the rest of the caption is going to be about something that's sponsored and they were paid to do it. But I like to kind of incorporate it, like she said at the end, thank you for this brand for sending me this, or kind of make it like my experience working with the brand. Like companies I've worked with, like Bear Paw, I worked with Bear Paw Shoes, and kind of talked about my experience working with them, and even thanking them, thanks for a great experience. Thank you for the time, and thank you for showing me all these great products. But at the end, always putting a hashtag. I usually use sponsored. I like it just more than ad. I think ad kind of just sounds like, yeah, it's an ad, but sponsor sounds a little more like it was a sponsored post instead of just an ad. So you put your time into it. So you want to kind of make that clear. But I do like to have some kind of acknowledgement there. Instead of just putting your hashtag sponsored and then typing a caption, make it a little more personal. Thank the brand or talk about your relation working with them and why you like the product, and then just throw in the sponsored hashtag at the end.
Thank you for that. Kate, I know you have to run to a board meeting, so let me give you this question. It's from Xin Yu. She asks, I'm curious, once you have a large group of followers, how much autonomy on content do you preserve? Can you still create content as freely as you did before?
Great question. I would say I create content more freely than I did before, because once I got to a certain number of followers, I realized, well, if what I was doing before worked, then whatever comes out of my mind, like with some thought process, will probably work still. And if my following is growing, then I should just continue to be creative and see what works. And if I offend people and they unfollow, then okay. Like I posted about the election and I lost like 40 followers, and that's okay. I learned. I'm not going to not post that because I feel passionate about my beliefs. But if it were something about the way I arranged a product, or if I maybe posted about a brand that was controversial and I noticed that I had a big drop off, or I had controversial messages, or people that were upset from my following, I would definitely listen to that and think about it and hear them out, because why not? The benefit of having this giant following is that I'm able to hear more perspectives and learn from more people. But at the end of the day, it has a following because of the content that I've created, and I trust my creative process. So I've found that with growth, I've only veered more from my original idea of what it should be, and tried out more and been more experimental, which has just been fun.
Awesome. We still have a little under a half hour to go, but Kate, we want to be respectful of the meeting that you have to get to. So if you need to leave, we will say goodbye to you now, but we appreciate the answers and your participation in at least half of today's panel.
Thank you so much for having me. Enjoy the rest of the time, everyone.
You got it. We're going to go to Justine. Jemiah asks, what is the range of costs and fees for contracting with an influencer? And what is sort of the difference between the costs around a celebrity versus a micro influencer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it really ranges because, one thing that's really important to note is that you're not just paying for reach, you're also paying for engagement. It's really important that when you're looking at an influencer, that you're not just looking at those followers. You want to look at the quality of their content on their page. Is it consistent with their image and with their brand and their brand message? But it's kind of a hard question to answer because it really just ranges. But I would say, when you're looking at nanos, the way we define nanos are, about 1,000 to 10,000 followers. With these relationships, a lot of the compensation can be, swag. It's anywhere between a couple of $100 to, a couple of thousand, depending on their partnership. As you move up into the micros and the mid tiers and the social celebrities, that number goes way up. We've seen, posts that, can range between 25,000 to 50,000 for, one in-feed post on Instagram. So that range is huge, and it just depends on the level of involvement and the type of post as well.
The audience questions are fantastic. Keep them coming. We'll keep them rolling. Sonia, so there's a question from Simone. She asks, and I like this is kind of inverted. She asks, what can brands do to stand out to you as an influencer? Meaning, what makes you want to work with a brand besides simply aligning with your content?
I think if brands take that extra time to look into things you've already done and to kind of mention that goes a long way. Like saying, if it's a skincare company, well, we've seen you worked with this skincare company, or we see that you're posting pictures about your skincare routine, something like that, and just showing that we've seen the kind of content you're posting, or we see things that you're interested in. And so kind of explaining the thought process behind why they wanted to reach out to you in the first place, I think that's important. Because you can just reach out and say, we think you'd align with our brand, but why? And you want to know why they're interested in you, because it makes you more interested in creating that relationship. And it's always better too if you have a partnership and the person who reached out to you and set it up maintains a good relationship with you, because you feel better about the brand, but you also feel better about the content you're putting out. You kind of have a contact there. Like, let's say if the content you're making, you have questions along the way, you always feel like there's someone that you can ask. And even if you're unsure, you can always email them a picture before you post it, things like that. And they're happy to do it. But I think if you're able to create more of a personal connection in that way, it's better than just reaching out. Throwing a product at someone or throwing a dollar amount makes you feel a little more personal and like you want to connect with them.
And that's great to hear too from your perspective, because it's not like you're just going to simply take money from any brand. You're going to be picky and choosy to make sure that brand aligns with your core values. Not everyone does that. Not all influencers do that. Justine, Catherine observes the fact that most influencers she sees are B2C. Do you know of any examples of B2B influencers within certain industries that you could share? She goes on to say she's not talking about folks like Gary Vee, but more about folks who have strong voices in a true B2B space like tech, IT, medical, not health, etc. So very, very specific question. Let's see what you come up with.
It is, and unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience in that space. I wish I could answer that question, but I'm happy to follow up with you and kind of dig into that question a little bit more internally. So feel free to reach out to me separately, and I'm happy to have that conversation.
Let me give you one that you might be able to answer. I don't have suggestions for B2B influencers either.
Okay.
We could phone a friend. We could use a lifeline.
Yeah, exactly.
How about this one from Melania Marcus? And it's like one word. I'm not sure if it's a first name or last name. How do you justify to your team, or let's just say brands that you're working with, what percentage of their marketing budget should go towards influencer marketing? Yeah, let's leave it at that. So how do you sort of advise brands on the budget distribution and allocation for influencer marketing?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question. A lot of brands that come to us are looking specifically for influencer marketing. We offer kind of a large range of services across media planning and implementation on social, content creation, brand identity help, and influencer marketing. So it just depends on the client's needs when they come to us. But I think that when we look at total budget, total marketing campaign budget, between 15 to 30% is a really good number. I think that for all of the reasons that I've mentioned before, there is a lot of power when it comes to influencers. I think that with e-commerce clients, we have the opportunity, with trackability, being able to see if followers are are clicking, the links in somebody's story or somebody's bio. And so there is really a lot more opportunity there to see the benefits of the engagement that we see with influencers followers. So there's a lot, you always want to have variety across your marketing campaign, as well as consistency across all of those different platforms. So I do think that there is an importance to kind of keep influencer marketing on the forefront. Mike, you're on mute.
I did put myself on mute. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, so let's look at a question from Tiza, Sonia. She said that most of what she has seen in terms of how influencers make money really do come from sponsorships. And Tiza's wondering, at what point can you turn being an influencer into a full-time career? And let me add to that on what are your plans in terms of whether or not you're going to make this into your full-time career, if it's not already after you graduate.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a good and a bad thing, but I think my influencing has been very tied to being a student and college life. So yeah, I don't really know what's going to happen after that. But I do think you'd have to obviously gain a bigger following to consider making it a full-time thing. But I think if you're finding that most of your time is going to this and like more time than you're spending working or in any other job that you have, that's when you could consider, how do I do this full time? And that just comes with putting yourself out there more and creating more content. So instead of posting once a week, you're posting twice a week and you're ramping that up. And then I think you'd go to creating content across different platforms. Like we mentioned TikTok, you know, branching into that, but also creating more videos on Instagram and figuring out how can you cross promote those? How can you put something on YouTube, but also put a part of it on Instagram, and maybe even make a version to go on TikTok, to kind of make yourself, again, like a brand. So it kind of goes down to figuring out what is your brand, what is your niche, what are you putting out there, and how is that going to translate into all of these different platforms. But like for me, it kind of started with being a student. So I did a lot of student ambassador programs, and obviously I had to be a student to qualify for those. So that was a really helpful thing for me because I was able to work with companies just by being a student, because I had that ability to reach into the college audience that someone who already graduated or someone who wasn't in college couldn't do that. So I had a unique ability to just tap right into that. But for me, that was really fun and I love getting to work with that, but I'm kind of experimenting with how can I just partner with other brands and go into being an ambassador for brands where it doesn't necessarily have to do with me being a student. So I hope to explore that a little more.
That's right. How do you keep reinventing yourself to stay relevant? And on this panel, we featured two Gen Z influencers, which is why I love this question from Patricia. Justine, I'll let you take this one, where Patricia says that she's an older comm alum. She's from the boomer generation. Is there, I'll avoid the okay boomer joke. Is there any hope of getting into influencer marketing for my generation, meaning her generation as a boomer? Do older people even respond to influencers?
I think that's a great question. I think that a lot of times brands are asking for, to reach the millennial audience or the Gen Z audience. And so, that is definitely, a strategy that I see a lot of brands having. But it really depends on the product. I mean, you have to be relevant to your audience. And if the product is offering value to, your generation, I think that being able to speak authentically to your audience about that product, there is definitely a niche for, different generations and different, products and brands. So, I think, Facebook is a great place for that. And, not just posting organic influencer content on Facebook, but really pushing the content out with paid media as well, and kind of marrying that together is really a strong strategy. Believe it or not, I know that TikTok, is widely used by a younger audience, but there is actually a huge kind of growing population of 35 plus. There's kind of what they call as like kind of mom and dad content, where parents are really using the platform to teach the younger generations how to do stuff at home, how to take care of yourself, in an emergency. And, they bring a lot of humor to it as well. I think that there's definitely opportunity there.
There are, and there's, a boomer among many that I follow on TikTok. She is a teacher, and she shows on her TikTok videos how messed up the English language is. So she, in effect, gives little grammar lessons, but does it in such an entertaining way. And she's a boomer. And I've seen people in, even the older generation from that, the silent generation, I think it's called, that are on TikTok and are becoming TikTok famous. So Patricia, there is hope for you yet, and maybe you can monetize that. Sonia, Goodwill, South Florida. We have a company asking a question. How long does an influencer brand relationship typically last? Is it a campaign for a year, long brainstorming relationship? I'm not sure what that means, but as an influencer, when do you know whether or not you are endorsing brands too much?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think it depends on what you're committing to. And obviously, you should be really aware of what that is on both sides of the company and the influencer. But you can do a one-time partnership, which is just like a paid promotion. And then the brand will reach out and say, we're offering this money amount, or we're offering you to test our products for free. You do it. And then most times, if it goes well, they could offer you to do it again. But when you're going into that, you're assuming it's a one-time thing. And then you have ambassador programs. So that's really different. That's something I've done a lot with being a student. And what happens is a marketing agency will work with a brand, and you'll be able to be contracted for, usually it's like 6 to 8 weeks or something. And you'd have a set schedule. You need to post one thing on Instagram every week, and you need to create a video this week or something like that. And they'll give you the products. You have certain weeks you promote certain products. So that's a very structured program. And those are outlined. You'd have a contract you sign. You're like an employee basically, and you'd go through a marketing agency who is contracted by a brand, and you are aware that that's going on for a certain amount of time. And then again, there's still the possibility to work with that agency again, maybe with a different brand. But for the most part, if you're just looking at influencers and products, it's usually a one-time thing that can grow. And brands are kind of reaching out to see how well they work with this person, because you don't know, it might not work out, and maybe your audience doesn't respond the way you thought you would, because then they probably wouldn't want to reach out again. So I think you test the waters and then you see how it goes.
Test and learn for sure. Justine, we're going to do the ROI question here. And Stephen McVeary, who's a COM alum and a former colleague of mine from Hill Holiday. So he asks and says, many brands struggle with quantifying total ROI on their influencer marketing spend. How should brands think about measuring and optimizing their influencer marketing programs? And what are the right KPIs?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think it's something that is ever evolving. But, with our clients, engagement rate is definitely, a huge KPI. I think that, being able to measure likes, comments, shares, saves, and impressions, those are, very valuable in their own right. I think, as I mentioned before, with e-commerce clients, there's also a need to drive to the website and drive site clicks and purchases. And, a lot, some companies are built out for that and make the process really seamless. But, again, I think for companies that are looking for ROI, I think it's important to, to have something to drive to have a call to action and be able to track that.
And I'll just make mention as well that Triller, which is arguably a TikTok competitor that's gained a lot of popularity, they partnered with a company called Influential on their measurement programs. So they claim now that they can measure the effect on influencer campaigns on Triller, measuring foot traffic, in-store sales, and TV tune-in. So definitely Google that. And it looks like we got our lifeline. Mark Nelson mentioned about B2B influencers that there are several, but generally industry specific. A great way to start is to find them just doing keywords related to your category or product, including the competition and even reviewers. So thank you, Mark, for that lifeline. Sonia, as you think about the future of influencer marketing, what worries you the most?
I think just oversaturating the market and oversaturating Instagram and TikTok obviously is going to become an issue with everyone creating similar content. And I think I worry that if we continue just having brands reach out and you promote a product, where does that lead to eventually? I mean, you have a cycle obviously of promoting and people buying, and then you keep going around like that. But if we're all just posting pictures of a product with us, there's only so far that that can go. So I'm wondering, I think what's going to happen is we're just going to have to adapt and create new ways. I mean, that's already happened with different video types, and you're always going to have something that comes out as a new creative way to stay ahead of the trend and to create content, but not just have it be like stagnant, like an Instagram picture and just looking at it. So it's going to have to be more creative ways, but I do worry that we're going to have a lot of the same content, especially now we're talking about it like everyone wants to be an influencer. So what happens when everyone tries to become an influencer?
As we talked about TikTok earlier, you can become a TikTok famous really quickly. So does it become oversaturated? While we're on you, Sonia, a question came in specifically for you about what's your favorite part about being a student ambassador, and what experience as an influencer continues to drive you to expand your repertoire in the space?
Yeah, so when I started, I actually did a program with Razor scooters, which I had no idea what this was going to turn into. I mean, I think we all remember Razor scooters like hitting you in the ankle when you tried to ride them, and it was just a funny thing. And I was like, there is no way that this is going to turn into anything. And I loved the product. I was like, this is so fun, but there's no way that I'm going to become, I don't know, something from this. There's no way I'm going to enjoy doing this enough to want to continue this experience. So that was my sophomore year, and I tried that out. And from that, I learned that being a student ambassador allows you to connect with your college audience, but not just on Instagram. I mean, you get to go around campus. Obviously, things are different with the pandemic, but before we used to be able to set up tables and I let people try out my Razor scooter, which was so fun. And I got to meet all these different people and hear about their experiences and then tell them about what I was doing. And I mean, it was a really great process because I would tell people about Razor scooter and then they would tell me about their life and I'd learn about them and they'd tell me, oh, this is really great that you're doing this. And so I loved getting to meet all these people. I think that was my favorite part, but also feeling like I was kind of connecting someone with something they needed or wanted and telling them more about something they might not have known. And I found from there that I was able to do all these other experiences. So I did stuff with Venmo and Rent the Runway and Bear Paw Shoes recently, which was so fun. And I always love getting to interact with the people who are engaging with what I'm promoting. And I think that's my favorite part. I just love getting to do that. And yeah, like I said, being a student was a great perk because I get to be a part of these programs. And my favorite part is definitely connecting with people, but also getting to learn about really cool brands and getting to feel like I get this professional experience.
Mhm. And Justine, I'm not sure if you've had experience working with nonprofits and doing influencer programs for them, but if you do you have any tips or tricks on how influencers can be used to help the mission of a nonprofit? And this is again from Goodwill, South Florida.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't have experience with nonprofits myself, but I will say, I know Mariette had mentioned earlier in my bio about the Immunity Boost Festival that we worked on. So, I think this is kind of a good example of using, influencers to kind of promote a and spread a unified message. The purpose behind the festival, it was the first virtual health and wellness music festival that was created by our CEO. And we partnered with health experts and doctors and musicians to kind of spread the message of the importance of strengthening your immune systems, especially in the era that we're in now. And we worked with like-minded brands as sponsors to help bring awareness to their products, matching them with influencers in our network of experts in the health and wellness space. So, I think virtual events, live virtual events are growing very rapidly during this time. And I think it's a great way to connect to an audience and spread a unified message. So that would be, my advice on that.
That is awesome. And I have one question left for each of you, and then we will wrap up. Sonia, I'm sure that you have seen on TikTok the person who has done this whole series that started with a paperclip and her mission to trade up to a big house. I'm sure everyone has seen that. The most recent trade was her trade to a tiny home. And it got a lot of backlash because it was seen, she sort of said, I finally did it. And everyone was like, yeah, that's not a real house. That's just a tiny home. And her entire TikTok read and felt and seemed like an ad for this tiny home company. So she got, a lot of negative comments, and everyone's like, you just sold out on us. We've been following you this whole time. How, as an influencer, does someone recover from that?
Well, I think it just goes back to deciding who you are and figuring out where you wavered from that. And I mean, if that's what your brand is, then you should stick with it, and you should, be true to that and say, this is what I'm promoting and this is what I'm about. But I think there's always a difficulty in creating content that you think people want to see, or something that you were paid to do, and you feel like it's not really what you see yourself doing, what you see yourself going into. And yeah, you can always have some posts or some content that wavers from what you do normally. But I think just being consistent, and again, being transparent and telling people this is what I'm interested in and this is what I'm doing, but really being honest with your followers and your audience, because that helps to create better engagement if they know what's going on, and just not keeping secrets and not being you're going about something. And so sticking to your own message and figuring out what you like, and if you like it, you should promote it.
And not coming across as deceptive, where it felt like this kind of snuck its way in. Just being open and honest that, hey, this is sponsored. I didn't see that she acknowledged it as being sponsored, which was even more curious. Justine, the last question is going to go to you. Much like the advertising industry, influencer marketing has rightfully taken a ton of scrutiny over the years for its lack of diversity. How do we finally fix this?
Wow, it's a powerful message. Yeah, I think that specifically with the brands that we work with, diversity is, one of the most important things that we keep in mind when, we go out and we search for creators to be part of the programs. I think that, it's just important to constantly be mindful of, representing the brand in the best way possible, and, representing the people who are, who your consumers and who your engagers and, your fans. Diversity and inclusion is extremely important. And, we make sure that, that is on the forefront when we are doing, when we are implementing our searches and we are reaching out to our influencers to work with. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, look, it just takes mindfulness and intention to ensure that what's going on in influencer marketing represents our population.
Absolutely.
So here's the deal, everyone. Our next Com Talk will be right after the winter break on January 27th. So definitely stay tuned for more info. But the topic is going to be on crisis communication. I want to thank our panelists, Justine, Sonia, and Kate, who had to leave for her board meeting, a very good reason. And I want to thank all of you guys for tuning in. Awesome questions, and be sure to come back to the next Com Talk on January 27th.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.